Why did the room fall quiet the moment she sat down? Not because she was late, she was. Not because she spoke, she didn't. It was the way the table subtly shifted away from her, chairs scraping just enough to make the avoidance audible. The way eyes skimmed past her face like she wasn't worth the effort of recognition. She noticed it all. She always did. She placed her folder on the table and folded her hands over it, knuckles faintly scarred, nails clean and short. No polish, no ring, nothing ornamental. She looked like someone who had learned long ago that being noticed for the wrong reasons could get you killed. The briefing room smelled faintly of old coffee and disinfectant. A wall-mounted screen flickered with a paused drone image of a remote coastal compound. Nobody explained it to her. Nobody needed to. She'd already read the file twice. She was here as a courtesy. That was the word they'd used. Courtesy meant expendable. The commander cleared his throat and began speaking as if she wasn't in the room. Coordinates, timelines, weather windows. The mission flowed around her presence without ever touching it. She listened anyway, committing details to memory out of habit. Wind direction, terrain elevation, entry angles. At the far end of the table, someone leaned back and muttered, "Didn't know we were bringing observers into this." A few quiet chuckles followed, not cruel, just dismissive, worse somehow. She didn't react. She had learned early in her career that silence unsettled people more than anger ever could. When the briefing ended, chairs scraped back and boots hit the floor. The room emptied quickly, like a tide pulling away from shore. She stood last, sliding her folder into her bag. As she turned to leave, the commander finally looked at her. His eyes lingered for a half-second longer than professional courtesy required. "They'll be testing you today," he said. She paused. "Testing me how, sir?" He hesitated. That was the first honest thing she'd seen from him all morning. "You'll see." Outside, the wind off the water cut sharp and cold, carrying the metallic scent of salt and fuel. The annex sat apart from the main base like something that had been intentionally forgotten. Chain-link fences, weather-beaten concrete, kennels lined in rigid rows. The dogs heard her before the men did. Low growls rippled through the yard, layered and restless, not the clean, disciplined sound of trained animals. Something frayed lived underneath it. Hunger, frustration, confusion. She stopped just inside the gate and took it in. 3 handlers leaned against a container near the far fence, coffee cups steaming. One of them glanced her way and snorted. "That her?" he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Another shrugged, "Guess so." The third looked her up and down, then laughed softly. "They really think she's gonna last." She walked past them without breaking stride. Her boots were scuffed, old, earned. The kind you kept because they fit your feet better than anything new ever could. She carried no visible weapon, no gear, just a small hard case in her left hand. A senior chief stepped forward to intercept her, posture loose but eyes sharp. "You're early," he said. "I'm on time," she replied. He didn't offer his hand. "You'll observe only, no interaction, no recommendations unless asked. You're not here to interfere." She nodded once. "Stay out of the way," he added. She stepped aside and did exactly that. From the corner of her vision, she felt it before she saw it. One of the dogs had stopped packing. It stood still at the fence, head tilted, eyes locked on her. Not aggressive, assessing. The way predators look at something unfamiliar but interesting. The chief followed her gaze and frowned. "They don't like civilians," he said. "They smell uncertainty." "I'm not uncertain," she replied. He gave a thin smile. "We'll see." The morning unfolded in noise and tension. Commands barked, leashes snapped, metal gates clanged. The dogs cycled through drills with uneven results. Some performed well, others didn't. Corrections came fast and hard. Too hard. She noticed everything. The dog that hesitated before biting, then froze completely when shouted at. The handler who yanked a leash high enough to lift paws off concrete. The laughter that followed, sharp and ugly. She felt something twist in her chest. Not anger, recognition. She stayed quiet. By midday, the dogs had started watching her. Not all at once, one at a time, during moments of confusion, stress, when commands conflicted or aggression spiked without direction. They looked to her. It made no sense to the men. They didn't notice. But she did. The largest one, tan, heavy-muscled, eyes too intelligent for the way he was treated, tracked her movements along the fence. His name was stenciled on the kennel card. Rex. A junior handler wandered over, smirking. "You're making him nervous," he said. "Dogs can smell fear." She turned to him slowly. "So can people." The smirk faltered. That was when the chief called everyone's attention. "Since our guest is here to observe," he said loudly, "might as well show her something real." The word real landed heavy. She knew before he finished speaking. By the time the sun began its slow descent, the yard had cleared of most personnel. Only senior handlers remained. The air felt tight, expectant. They explained the test like it was a favor. 3 dogs, no leash, no commands, no protection. Step into the pen and prove you belonged. Or don't and disappear quietly. She asked about documentation, medical standby, oversight. They laughed. She looked at the kennel cards again, noted the feeding logs, the gaps. Her jaw tightened. "Fine," she said. Silence followed. They hadn't expected agreement. As she walked toward the containment pen, she felt something settle inside her. Not fear, focus. The same calm she'd found before missions when there was no room left for doubt. The dogs were already inside when the gate shut behind her. 3 shapes, 3 minds, 3 different expressions of tension. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She breathed. The first growl rolled low and uncertain. She adjusted her stance by inches, keeping them all in view, letting them read her honestly. When the first one lunged, not fully just testing, she didn't flinch. And then she knelt. Slow, controlled, palms open. The yard outside went very quiet. The dogs hesitated. Confusion rippled through the pack. She felt her heartbeat steady, measured against her breath. This wasn't dominance, it wasn't submission. It was something older, something fluent. And as the largest dog stepped forward, sniffing her open hand, she knew the truth they hadn't wanted to admit. They weren't testing her. They were exposing themselves. And the dogs knew it too. Why did no one step forward when the first dog sat down? Not the handlers. Not the chief. Not the men who had laughed an hour earlier like this was entertainment. The silence stretched, brittle and uncomfortable, as if the yard itself was waiting for someone to explain what it had just witnessed. Inside the pen, she remained kneeling. Concrete pressed cold through the fabric of her pants. She could feel the faint vibration of the dog's breathing, the shift of weight as instincts recalibrated. This was the most dangerous moment, not when teeth flashed or bodies lunged, but when confusion crept in. Confusion made animals unpredictable. It made men worse. The largest dog stood directly in front of her now, close enough that she could smell him. Old sweat, kibble dust, the faint copper note of stress. His ears twitched at a sound only he could hear. She kept her gaze soft, unfixed, angled just past his shoulder. Not avoidance, respect. Behind him, the second dog stopped packing. The third, youngest, restless, circled wide, nails clicking softly, energy coiling and uncoiling like a spring unsure where to land. Outside the fence, someone whispered, "This isn't right." Another voice answered, brittle with disbelief, "He's gonna snap any second." She exhaled slowly. That breath mattered more than anything she could have said. The big dog lowered his head, not in threat, in consideration. He sniffed again, deeper this time, pulling in information the way only dogs could: breath, skin, intention. Something shifted behind his eyes. He sat. The sound was small, almost nothing, fur brushing concrete, weight settling. But it hit the men outside the pen like a physical blow. "What the hell?" someone started. "Don't," another hissed. She didn't react, didn't reach out, didn't reward the behavior. Reward came later if it came at all. Right now, neutrality was everything. Calm without expectation. Presence without demand. The second dog approached next, slower, cautious. He came from her left, body angled, tail still high but no longer rigid. He sniffed her forearm, paused, then stepped back half a pace. He didn't sit. Not yet. The youngest dog stopped circling. That alone sent a ripple of unease through the watchers. He was the unpredictable one, the redirect risk, the dog they joked about like he was broken. His head tilted, eyes flicked between the others. Pack dynamics were rewriting themselves in real time. She felt the weight of it settle into her chest, not pride, not triumph, responsibility. Because once an animal offered trust, even tentatively, you owed it honesty in return. Outside the fence, the chief shifted his stance. The confidence had drained from him, replaced by calculation. He didn't like this, not because it was dangerous, but because it was out of his control. He cleared his throat. "All right, that's enough, you've made your point." She didn't look at him. Inside the pen, the second dog sat. The third remained standing, tense but no longer aggressive. His ears flicked, his tail lowered just a fraction. A question, not a challenge. She turned her head slightly, exposing the side of her neck. A deliberate risk. Someone outside swore under their breath. The youngest dog stepped forward, then hesitated. Doubt flickered. He looked back at the others, searching for cues. The big one didn't move. The second remained seated, calm, present. The youngest dog bowed. Not submission, alignment. Then he sat. No commands. No force. No fear. 3 combat-trained dogs, conditioned through hunger and pressure and aggression, sat quietly around a kneeling woman who hadn't said a single word. The yard felt different now. Not quieter, heavier. Because something undeniable had happened, and no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. She rose slowly, one smooth motion, no sudden shifts. The dogs stayed where they were. She turned toward the gate. "Open it," the chief said sharply. No one moved. He repeated himself, louder this time. "Open the damn gate." The handler nearest the latch hesitated, eyes darting between the dogs and the woman. His hand hovered, then dropped back to his side. She didn't wait. She stepped forward, lifted the inner latch herself and pushed. The gate creaked open. The dogs did not rush. They did not bolt. The largest stood and followed her out at a measured pace, stopping just behind her left leg. The others remained inside, seated, watching. That detail unsettled the men more than anything else. The chief stared as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "That's not how this works," he said. She finally looked at him. Her voice was quiet, even. "That's exactly how it works, you just forgot." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a man near the back, one who hadn't laughed earlier, one who had kept his mouth shut all day, cleared his throat. "I've seen this before," he said slowly. All eyes turned. He stepped forward, uncertainty etched into his face. "Not here, overseas, years ago." He looked at her, really looked. There was a female operator attached to a joint task force. She worked with a dog named Dozer. Everyone thought she was soft, until she was. She didn't confirm it, didn't deny it either. "You're her," he said, realization dawning. "Or someone like her." The chief scoffed. "That's enough mythology for one day." The man shook his head. This isn't mythology. Silence followed. It was broken by the arrival of engines. Two unmarked vehicles rolled into the annex lot, tires crunching over gravel. Doors opened. People stepped out who didn't wear kennel gear and didn't look impressed by anyone present. Oversight. Clipboards appeared. Kennels were inspected. Logs were opened and read aloud. Feeding schedules didn't match reality. Water bowls were empty. Equipment turned up that shouldn't have existed anymore. The chief tried to explain. He used words like tradition, stress inoculation, culture. None of them landed. She wasn't questioned, not formally. One of the officers glanced at her once, nodded, and kept walking. That nod carried weight. By evening, the yard was quiet in a different way, not stunned silence, aftershock silence, the kind that followed exposure. The chief was relieved of duty pending investigation. Handlers were sent home early. Bite work was suspended indefinitely. She sat on a bench near the fence, her case at her feet, watching the dogs settle into their runs. The largest one lingered near the gate, ears forward, eyes tracking her until she stood. She approached slowly, opened the run, and stepped inside. He pressed his forehead briefly against her thigh, then moved aside. Not affection. Acknowledgement. She rested her hand lightly on his shoulder for one heartbeat, then withdrew. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the concrete. Someone approached from behind, the quiet handler from earlier. "Why stay?" he asked softly. "You could have walked away. Nobody would have blamed you." She considered the question. Because bad systems don't fix themselves. Because silence doesn't protect anyone. Because animals and people pay the price when power goes unchecked. She chose the simplest truth. Because they deserve better, she said. The handler nodded. So do you. She didn't answer that. As darkness settled over the annex, she locked the final gate, checked the last water bowl, and stood alone for a moment in the quiet. Tomorrow wouldn't be easier, but it would be honest. And sometimes that was enough to begin again. Why did the yard feel louder the next morning, despite fewer voices? She noticed it the moment she stepped through the gate, not the barking. That was actually less. It was the space between sounds, the pauses, the way handlers moved more carefully, as if the concrete itself had learned to remember. The dogs sensed it too. They didn't rush the fence when she passed. No frantic packing, no teeth on wire, instead heads lifted, ears turned, bodies oriented, attention, not agitation. She didn't mistake it for loyalty. That would have been arrogant. Dogs didn't give that away cheaply. What they offered now was something else. Readiness. She set her case down near the bench and stood still for a moment, letting the yard settle around her. The morning air carried the smell of damp concrete and salt. Somewhere beyond the fence, gulls cried. Normal sounds, familiar. But beneath them ran a quiet tension, the kind that followed disruption. People were different today. A few handlers avoided her eyes entirely. One pretended to be busy with a leash that didn't need adjusting. Another watched her openly, curiosity battling with something like shame. The interim coordinator arrived shortly after, a lieutenant from another base. Clean boots, careful words. He introduced himself, shook hands where protocol demanded, and got straight to business. "I've been instructed to pause all high-stress evolutions," he said, voice neutral. "We'll reassess procedures before resuming." She nodded. "Good." He hesitated. "You're staying." "For now." He studied her for a beat, longer than necessary. "I won't pretend I understand what happened yesterday." "You don't need to," she said. "You just need to not undo it." That earned a thin smile. Fair enough. She didn't seek authority. It came anyway, quietly, the way it always did when people weren't sure who else should lead. By mid-morning, she was walking the runs with a clipboard she hadn't asked for. She checked water levels, bedding, pads of paws for cracks and swelling, noted small things others had missed because they weren't dramatic enough to matter before. One dog flinched when a handler raised his voice nearby. She marked it down. Another refused food, nosing the bowl aside. Stress response. She noted that too. The youngest, Luca, watched her approach with his head tilted, tail low but loose. When she crouched, he took a step forward on his own. That was new. She didn't reach out. Trust grew faster when you didn't chase it. At lunch, the yard emptied again. She sat alone on the bench, eating from a plain brown bag. No phone, no music, just quiet chewing and thought. This was the part people didn't understand. They thought moments like yesterday changed things instantly. That exposure led to reform. That revelation corrected course. Sometimes it did. More often, it provoked resentment. She felt it already, humming beneath the surface. People who'd built their identity on control didn't like seeing it reframed as fluency. People who'd mistaken fear for respect didn't enjoy learning the difference. She'd been here before, different country, different unit, same undercurrent. It never ended cleanly. That afternoon, one of the handlers approached her, younger than most, nervous. He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Ma'am," he said, then corrected himself. "I mean sorry." She looked up. "What do you need?" He swallowed. "I don't think Ghost is right." She closed her bag. "Show me." They walked together toward the run. Ghost lay near the back, body curved away from the gate. His eyes tracked her, but his head didn't lift. She crouched low, scanning, breathing shallow, subtle tremor in the flank. "When did he last work?" she asked. The handler checked his notes. "Yesterday morning, before everything." "And food?" He hesitated. "He ate." "How much?" Another pause. "I don't know." She sighed, not in frustration but fatigue. "Okay, we'll start there." She requested the vet. The handler looked surprised but relieved. By the time the examination finished, the conclusion was quiet but clear. Dehydration, early signs of gastric stress, nothing dramatic yet. "Rest him," she said. "No drills, no bite work." The handler nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." She almost corrected him again. Almost. Later, she stood alone near the fence as the sun slid westward. The largest dog, Rex, approached the gate slowly. He didn't bark, just stood close but not pressing. She opened the gate and stepped inside. He sniffed her boots, then sat, heavy and solid as if anchoring himself to the ground. She rested a hand on his shoulder, feeling the tension there, the strength misused for too long. "You're not broken," she murmured, barely louder than breath. "You were just never taught to rest." He leaned into the touch for half a second, then straightened, dignity intact. Outside the run, someone watched. One of the older handlers, the one who'd laughed the loudest the day before. His face was unreadable now. "You make it look easy," he said. She didn't turn. "It is." He kicked at the gravel. "We were told this was how you made them sharp." She faced him then, not angry, tired. "Sharp tools still need care, otherwise they snap." He nodded slowly, like someone rearranging long-held beliefs. "No one ever explained it like that." "No one ever asked," she said. That evening, after the dogs were settled and the yard locked, she sat in her quarters alone. Sparse, temporary, the kind of place you didn't decorate because you didn't expect to stay. She removed her boots and flexed her feet, wincing at the familiar ache. Old injuries murmured in protest. Knees, lower back, a shoulder that never quite healed right. She lay back on the narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. It never did after days like this. Her mind replayed moments she didn't invite. A different compound, a different dog, blood on concrete that hadn't been hers, a choice made too late. She rolled onto her side, jaw tight. Redemption was a dangerous word. It implied an end point, a balance restored. She didn't believe in that. She believed in maintenance, in showing up again tomorrow and doing it a little better than yesterday. The next morning, the dogs greeted her without noise. Not silent, breathing presence, awareness. She walked the line, touching the fence lightly as she passed, checking, accounting. At Luca's run, she paused. He approached the gate immediately, eyes bright, body loose. She opened it. He stepped out, stood beside her, then sat without prompting. She crouched, resting her forearm lightly across her knee. He leaned in, shoulder brushing her leg. Not submission. Partnership. She closed her eyes for one brief moment and let herself feel it. Not pride. Hoping. Because change didn't announce itself with speeches or medals. Sometimes it sat quietly at your side, waiting to see if you would stay. And she intended to. Why did the phone ring at 2:07? She woke before the second vibration, already sitting up, breath held, the way you do when your body recognizes urgency before your mind catches up. The room was dark and still, the thin curtains lifting slightly in the coastal wind. For a half-second, she didn't know where she was. Then the kennel yard came back to her, the dogs, the quiet. She reached for the phone. Yes. A pause on the other end, then a voice she didn't recognize, careful, professional, too awake for this hour. There's been an incident. She closed her eyes, not surprise, just confirmation. I'm on my way, she said, already swinging her legs off the bed. By the time she reached the annex, floodlights washed the yard in harsh white. A small cluster of vehicles idled near the gate. People stood in knots, voices low, faces tight. She didn't ask what happened, she could see it. One of the runs was open. Not forced, open. Inside, bedding was torn. A water bowl lay tipped, empty. The dog was still there, packing in tight circles, breath fast, eyes blown wide. Not aggressive, panicked. A handler stood nearby, pale, hands shaking. Another sat on the curb, head in his hands. What changed? She asked quietly. The handler looked up, startled to see her. He didn't respond like usual, we thought. His voice cracked. We thought he was refusing. Who was on shift? She asked. Silence. She scanned faces until someone finally spoke. Reeves called in, a junior tech said. Said he wanted to observe, just observe. Her jaw tightened, she said nothing. Did he enter the run? She asked. The handler nodded. Just for a minute, no leash. He said he knew how to handle them. She exhaled slowly. Where is he now? Left before anyone could stop him. Of course he had. She stepped into the run. The dog froze the moment he saw her. His packing stuttered, then slowed. He watched her like she was the only fixed point in a spinning world. She lowered herself to one knee, not touching, not crowding. It's okay, she murmured, barely sound. You're not in trouble. The dog's breathing began to slow, matching hers. The tension bled out in increments so small you had to be patient enough to notice them. Outside the run, the handlers watched, shaken. One of them whispered, "He's never calmed down that fast." She didn't respond. When the dog finally lay down, head on paws, eyes still open but no longer frantic, she rose and stepped back out. Lock the run, she said. No one goes in until morning, vet first thing. Yes, ma'am, someone said automatically. She didn't correct them. They needed the structure right now. By dawn, the story had already started changing. By mid-morning, it had been reshaped. By afternoon, it had been sanitized. She heard it in fragments. Reeves had only been checking procedures. The dog was unstable anyway. This proved why stricter methods were necessary. She stood in the yard listening, hands in her pockets, face unreadable. Then she walked into the admin shack and asked for the logs. They hesitated. She waited. The logs told the truth the way paper always did. Times that didn't line up. Entries written in the same handwriting across multiple shifts. A pattern that wasn't sloppy, it was intentional. She closed the binder and looked up. "This ends," she said. The interim coordinator swallowed. "We're already under review." "Good," she replied, "because this doesn't survive review." That afternoon, oversight returned. Not casually this time, with purpose. Interviews were conducted, statements taken, footage reviewed again more carefully. The incident at 2:07 was added to the record. Reeves was contacted, ordered to return. He didn't. That fact said more than any testimony could. By evening, the yard was quiet again, but the silence felt different, heavier, sadder. She sat on the bench, watching the dog settle. Luca lay near the front of his run, ears flicking toward her every few seconds. Rex rested on his side, chest rising slow and steady. Ghost slept. That alone felt like a victory. Someone approached, the young handler from earlier. He stood awkwardly, helmet tucked under one arm. "I didn't know," he said. She looked at him. "About what?" "About how bad it had gotten." His voice dropped. I thought it was normal." She nodded. "Most people do, until something breaks." He hesitated. "Why didn't you stop it sooner? I mean, if you knew." The question wasn't accusatory, it was honest. She considered it. "Because you can't dismantle a system until it shows you its seams," she said finally. "Yesterday it did." He absorbed that quietly. "I'm glad you were here." She gave a small nod. "So am I." That night she dreamed. Not of the yard. Of another place, another dog, another moment where she'd hesitated just long enough. She woke with her heart pounding, the echo of it lingering in her chest like unfinished business. In the morning, she went straight to the youngest run. Luca was waiting. He rose when he saw her, tail low but loose, eyes bright. She opened the gate and stepped inside. He pressed his forehead gently against her knee. She rested her palm there, grounding herself as much as him. "Still here," she whispered, "so am I." The program didn't change overnight. It changed in inches. Handlers asked more questions, raised their voices less, paid attention to details that didn't show up on performance charts. Some resisted, some left. The dogs noticed. Aggression softened into focus. Reactivity gave way to curiosity. Recovery times shortened. Injuries dropped. One afternoon, she watched a handler stop mid-command, take a breath and try again, calmer. The dog responded immediately. She looked away, something tight easing in her chest. Weeks passed. Oversight concluded its review. Findings were issued, policies revised. Reeves was officially removed. No announcement, no spectacle. Just absence. On her last evening at the annex, she walked the yard one final time. Checked bowls, gates, logs. At Luca's run, she paused. He approached the fence and sat. She didn't open it this time. "You're going to be okay," she said softly. He tilted his head, as if considering the statement, then lay down. She stood there for a moment longer, hand resting against the wire. Change didn't roar. It didn't demand applause. Sometimes it arrived quietly at 2:07 in the morning, inconvenient and unwelcome, and refused to be ignored. She turned off the lights and walked away, boots steady on concrete. Tomorrow, someone else would take over. But tonight the yard was calm. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Why did it feel harder to leave than it ever had to stay? She noticed it in the way her boots hesitated at the doorway that morning. A fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but she'd learned to trust those pauses. They usually meant something inside her was resisting the order of things. The annex was waking slowly. Fog clung low to the ground, turning the kennel rows into silhouettes. The dogs stirred one by one, not barking, just shifting, stretching, aware. It struck her then how different the morning sounded now. No frantic claws, no sharp, panicked noise. Just breath, weight, readiness. She walked the yard out of habit, even though she didn't have to anymore. Her reassignment orders sat folded in her pocket, creased soft from being handled too often. Stateside. Advisory role. Clean exit. Safe. She stopped in front of Rex's run. He was already standing, head high, eyes steady. He didn't press the gate, didn't pace. He waited. She opened the latch. He stepped out slowly, as if making sure the permission was real, then stood beside her, shoulder aligned with her thigh. Not leaning, just present. "You're getting good at this," she murmured. His ears flicked, that was all. They walked a short loop together, no leash, no commands. A quiet agreement between two beings who understood restraint better than force. When she stopped, he stopped. When she turned, he turned. No performance, no audience. She guided him back into the run and locked the gate. Her hand lingered on the fencing longer than necessary. Across the yard, a handler watched her. One of the newer ones, younger, still learning the difference between authority and attention. "Ma'am," he said, approaching carefully, "I heard you're leaving." She nodded. "Soon." He swallowed. What happens now? It was a bigger question than he realized. She glanced toward the runs. "Now you keep doing the work quietly, every day." He frowned. "What if it slips back?" She met his eyes. "Then you don't look away." That seemed to land somewhere deep. He nodded once, sharp like a decision. Later that morning, the interim coordinator called her into the admin shack. He stood when she entered, respectful now in a way that wasn't forced. "I won't insult you with a speech," he said, "but I wanted you to know we're changing the intake process. Handler screening, mandatory behavioral education, independent audits." She listened, arms folded loosely. "And the dogs?" she asked. "Feeding protocols standardized, vet oversight increased, rest cycles enforced." She exhaled slowly. "Good." He hesitated. "You could stay, we could make it official." She shook her head. "You don't need me here long term. You need people who believe this without watching it happen first." He smiled faintly. "You always talk like you're already gone." She didn't answer. That afternoon she packed her quarters. It didn't take long. She traveled light, always had. The room looked unchanged when she finished, like she'd never been there at all. Except for the quiet. Before sunset, she walked the yard one last time. Luca was waiting at his run, tail relaxed, eyes bright. He rose when he saw her and sat immediately, posture loose, confident. She opened the gate. He stepped out and pressed his forehead gently into her thigh. She crouched, resting her forearm across her knee, letting him stay there as long as he wanted. "You're not my responsibility anymore," she whispered. "That's a good thing." He breathed out, warm and steady. She stood, guided him back inside, and locked the gate. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She stood in the center of the yard and looked around. At the fences, the concrete, the runs that had once echoed with fear. She let herself feel it, not pride, not relief, something quieter. Closure. That night she didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed, boots on, elbows on her knees, staring at the wall. Memories drifted in uninvited. Another base, another dog, one she'd loved too much maybe, one she hadn't protected fast enough. She carried that failure like a stone for years, let it shape her restraint, her silence. Tonight it felt lighter. Not gone, just balanced. At dawn, she loaded her bag into the unmarked vehicle waiting at the gate. The engine idled softly. The driver didn't rush her. She turned back once. The dogs were awake. Not all of them watching her, but enough. She raised a hand, palm open. No command, no farewell. Just acknowledgement. The gate closed behind her with a soft metallic click. The road away from the annex curved along the coastline, the ocean flashing silver through breaks in the trees. She watched it pass without really seeing it. Her phone buzzed once. A message from an unknown number. Yards holding steady. Luca 8, Rex calm, ghost played today. She smiled faintly and typed back a single word. Good. Hours later, as the base disappeared behind her, she felt the familiar pull of the next assignment settling in. New faces, new resistance, new quiet battles no one would see. She welcomed it. Because strength, she'd learned, wasn't about being loud enough to dominate a room. It was about being steady enough to change one. And somewhere behind her, in a fenced yard by the water, that lesson was breathing, moving, learning how to trust again, without ever knowing her name. Why did the memory return now, on a road she thought she'd already left behind? The drive blurred into hours, then into nothing at all. Asphalt, sky, the steady hum of the engine. She kept both hands on the wheel, posture relaxed but alert, like she was still on approach. Old habits didn't fade just because circumstances changed. She should have felt relief. That was the expected emotion at the end of an assignment like this. Clean exit. No fallout attached to her name. No official reprimands, no whispered accusations following her to the next command. Instead, she felt something closer to vigilance. Because real endings rarely announce themselves. They revealed their truth later, when you thought it was safe to stop paying attention. Her phone buzzed again as dusk settled. Another update, short, practical, no embellishment. Handlers asked questions today, not defensively, curious. She read it twice. That mattered more than any memo ever would. She didn't reply right away. The sky darkened as she crossed state lines, clouds bruised purple and gray. She rolled the window down slightly, letting cold air cut through the warmth of the car. It grounded her, reminded her she was still here, still moving. A gas station stop, fluorescent lights, the smell of burnt coffee and rubber mats. She stood at the counter waiting for change, eyes tracking exits without conscious effort. The man behind her shifted uncomfortably. She realized then how often people mistook quiet awareness for something else. Coldness, distance, intimidation. They didn't see what it really was. Care. She drove on. Sometime after midnight, fatigue crept in. Not the bone-deep exhaustion of combat or crisis, but something softer. Emotional depletion. The kind that followed sustained restraint. She pulled into a rest stop and shut off the engine. The silence rang. She leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. That was when the other memory came. Not the yard, not the dogs. The one she never spoke about. A different mission, years earlier, dust in the air so thick it tasted like metal, a compound cleared too quickly, a call made too late. A dog had gone in first. He hadn't come back out. She saw it again. The moment she realized what had happened, the split second where training told her to move forward and instinct screamed to stop. She had followed training. She always had. The dog's name surfaced unbidden. She swallowed hard. People talked about redemption like it was an act, a single choice, a dramatic reversal. She knew better. Redemption, if it existed at all, lived in repetition. In the thousand small decisions that followed the worst one you ever made. She opened her eyes and stared at the dark windshield. "I'm still trying," she whispered to no one. The rest stop was empty when she finally pulled back onto the road. Morning came quietly. She arrived at her destination just after sunrise, a temporary billet near a training facility she'd visited once before. Different coast. Same language of order and waiting. She checked in, signed forms, accepted a key card. No fanfare. Her role here was advisory, observation, evaluation, words that sounded passive but carried weight when used correctly. She attended briefings and listened more than she spoke. She watched how people treated what couldn't speak back: equipment, junior personnel, animals used in demonstrations. Patterns revealed themselves quickly. She didn't intervene immediately. She never did, because real change required timing and patience. Weeks passed. Her phone continued to buzz every few days. Luca passed recert. Ghost's recovery time improved. Handlers corrected each other today, no shouting. Each message was a thread connecting past to present, proof that what she'd started hadn't unraveled the moment she left. One afternoon during a demonstration, a young handler froze. The dog hesitated, confused by conflicting signals. The room tensed. She didn't move. The handler took a breath, reset, tried again. The dog responded cleanly. No one applauded. She felt something ease inside her chest. Later, the handler approached her hesitant. "I remembered what you said," he admitted, "about breath, about being clear." She nodded. "You did the work." He smiled, proud but contained. That night she sat alone in her room, lights off, city noise drifting in through the window. She thought about all the places she'd been sent to fix something quietly, then leave before anyone decided how to label her. She preferred it that way. Legacy was a word people used when they wanted permanence. She believed in influence instead. Before sleep took her, she checked her phone one last time. A photo waited. Luca, sitting calmly beside a handler she recognized, the dog's posture loose, confident, the handler's hand resting lightly, respectfully on his back. No tension, no dominance. Just trust. She didn't save the photo. She didn't need to. Weeks later, during a briefing she was barely involved in, someone quoted a line she recognized, not as hers, but as something that had entered the system. "Control isn't volume," the officer said. "It's consistency." She looked down at her notes and allowed herself the smallest smile. Because that was how it worked. The lessons that mattered never carried names. They survived because they were useful, not because someone took credit for them. On her final day at that billet, she declined a farewell lunch. She packed quietly. Before leaving, she walked past a training field where dogs and handlers moved in steady rhythm. No shouting, no unnecessary force. She paused at the edge unseen. Satisfied. The road called again. It always did. As she drove away, she understood something she'd never quite been able to articulate before. Strength wasn't proven in moments of dominance or spectacle. It revealed itself in restraint, in the choice to listen when you could command, in the discipline to remain calm when chaos invited you to escalate. Dignity didn't demand recognition. It simply acted. And somewhere, whether in a kennel by the water, a quiet training field, or a moment at 2:07 when no one wanted to answer the phone, those actions accumulated. Not loudly, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to change the outcome for someone who couldn't speak for themselves. Enough to matter.